We're now going to look at another framing detail, or in this case, a roof rainwater gutter detail. But we're going to have a look at a half round gutter with a different type of rafter and a different type of soffit. So this had a flat soffit, a 90mm rafter, a quad gutter, and a Novaline fascia. What if we wanted to have exposed rafter ends? Now, if we were to do this, it would normally follow a few other patterns. So normally, instead of being a 90mm rafter, it would probably be a larger piece of timber. Not always, but possibly. So let's just assume this is going to be a 140mm piece of timber. So we're going to increase this by 50mm. Now, if this is a larger rafter, which probably also means that it's a traditionally cut framed roof instead of a truss framed roof, it's probably also going to need to be notched. So let's bring this down 20mm and we'll notch out this corner. So we'll just move those points and we'll bring this one back. And in this case, instead of the rafter and the ceiling joist being cut together, the ceiling joist in this case is going to go past and sit on the top plate like this. So we're seeing the rafter in the foreground and we're seeing the ceiling joist in the background. We'll leave this for now as a brick veneer, but of course this could also apply if it was a cavity brick or a timber frame and clad detail also. And we'll copy the rest of this roof just to make this really simple. I got too much, I'm aware of that. I'm just going to move it up here. I'll delete everything that I don't want. What I'm wanting to keep here is the roof sheeting and the battens and the insulation. So I'll move this down into position and I'll move it based on the batten, and for now I'm just going to paste the batten there and we're going to move it a little bit more later. I'll just group all that together and we're going to slide that down as necessary. Now, in order to have exposed rafters, that means that we're not going to have a lining on the underside of the rafter. That will also typically mean that I can't get away with just using battens because I don't want to see these battens and I don't want to see this insulation. So instead of having a batten here, typically I'm going to have some type of lining. So if I move this away considerably for now, we'll move this all the way up here. Let's put timber lining boards here instead. So I can use this same timber for now. And we might assume that the timber lining boards are 19mm. Now this could be tongue and groove, or this could be V-groove or something like that. It doesn't really matter. Now we will see that. So if we assume, for instance, that's a 200mm, I could draw a line here. Let's do it this way. Make it a bit thicker. And I'll multiply this with a spread of 200 or 190. So just dividing this into separate panels. Again, it could be V-groove, it could be tongue and groove. It's probably not just straight cut, but I don't need to see it at that level of detail. That's fine. Now I do want, ideally, something to continue along here. So I need something to continue. What is that something going to be? Am I going to have a batten that goes over the top of it? Obviously this is thinner than the batten zone, and we're going to need a smaller batten. So let's just create what that would look like. 25mm. In this case, I'll make it 45. It could, of course, be bigger as well. So I want this to sit here. And I can group these together, group, and maybe I'll just need a couple of these. Move, drag a copy, and we'll do at least, say, 300 center. Now the idea is that the roof sheet is going to continue, sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button. The roof sheet's going to continue across this. and the sarking blanket may continue through, or it may just be sarking, so we could actually have a difference going from a blanket to a sheet. Of course, the point here is that this is outside, so I don't technically need a blanket when it's outside, although I could still have a blanket if I want to. The blanket's going to help to reduce the sound, but I would also just need to make sure that the thickness of that blanket's not going to create a problem for how this would work. So for now, we'll just leave this represented like this to keep it nice and simple. The next thing I need to consider is what type of gutter am I going to use? And in this case, I want to use a half round gutter. So I'll take this, another version of this PDF, I'll explode it, and I just want to keep this one here. So instead of deleting everything else, I'll just move this one away this time. And then delete that all in one go. I'll do what I did last time and check the scale. In this case, I'll use the 97mm, edit, reshape, resize, define graphically, 97. I'll delete all the rest of these. Select, offset inside, and I want that to be less than 1 millimeter. Close it. You see that didn't offset very well. That's because it wasn't probably drawn very well from what we can see. So if I was to try to fix this, let's just offset this part. It's going to be really tricky because I now need to line that up. Something else is also going a little bit wrong here, but that's okay. I have to make these join, otherwise that's not going to close. And I need to close this end. Now hopefully that's going to work. There was a few errors in this case, so it might not work like I wanted to in the first go. We'll pick up the setting of this fill again. There we go, it worked all right. Turn the magnet back on to make it really easy to grab that fill. Move the half round gutter, delete the lines. This is backwards again, so we'll mirror it, move mirror. So I want the roll on the outside. Now where does this sit? That's the question, of course. So this again needs to sit below the roof line. In this case, I want to expose the ends, but it needs to come out a little bit because we can see that because it's half round, it's a little bit trickier to fix. It's not easy to fix it to a fascia. In this case, it's not even easy to fix it directly to a rafter. And so I need to have a half round gutter bracket that this fixes to. Now I could use a strap fixing, but I prefer the look of the half round gutter bracket. Now I can represent that. I can try to draw it. So I could use the same method as before, offset. Now I'm sort of limited with what I can offset here. I'm going to offset as much as I can, and then I'll delete all the bits that I don't want. Let's see if I can make that faster. Great. So then I'm left with these few arcs. So they all need to be grouped together, and then I can offset that again if I need to. Or I can just draw a new arc myself, or I can use a spline. So I'll just try to draw a real arc in this case. So I'm going to suggest that the bracket gets very thin on the edge. Now this isn't a custom item, this is an off-the-shelf item, but unfortunately I just couldn't find any nice details for it, so I'm just going to draw it quickly. So I'm going to do this as a 3-point curve. I haven't got it right in the first go, but we'll see that it will work in the end. So I'm going to need to stretch that curve out a little bit. And then I just want it to have a bit more depth at the back. Now I think it's only 5 mil, not 10. All right, so that's just a representation of my half round gutter bracket sitting on the outside. So now I've got my roof sheeting, I've got my half round gutter bracket. We've extended the rafter depth. We've changed the ceiling joist so that it's running past the rafter. Now, how does this finish? Now, this could be brick veneer or it could be weatherboard cladding, like I said. Now, typically, I wouldn't be doing this type of detail for a brick veneer anyway. It's more likely to be a weatherboard clad detail. So I'm going to delete the brick from here, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to have a look at replacing this with a James Hardie weatherboard cladding or a WeatherTex. Now, if I wanted it to be real timber, I'd use WeatherTex. If I wanted it to be fiber cement, I might use something like James Hardie. James Hardie has a linear. Let's do it this way. So I might open it up first. So this is the look that I'm going for in this particular circumstance. And we can see some detailing here to explain how it's actually fixing. This is what I want to copy effectively. So I'm going to find one that looks pretty good in terms of a detail. So this is page 4. This is the one that we're going to import. Now these details aren't quite the same as the Lysarts one. So when I try to explode this, we see it's only going to give me an image. So there's an image there, and then there's bits as well. So in this case, all that I'm wanting to keep is this element, and I just need to make sure it's the right size. So as before, I'll do it all in this case. It's a bit of a mess, but that's fine. Resize, define graphically, and make sure it's got that 30 mil lap from here to here. I want that to be 30. Now, I don't want to have all this mess. Like before, I'm not going to keep that. I'm just going to use this to trace over a fill. What is it? So it's fiber cement, so it will look like this, just like the fiber cement Safite lining that I had. But I'll just trace over this one. Now I can do this in one go with a magic wand. And I might just copy over this one as well, just to help explain how that works. So again, it's a 30 mil gap. I'll just copy that and copy this just to remind myself of where it needs to sit. I'll move this into place. Now, where do we start? When we're doing weatherboard, of course, the way that the overlap works is that we need to start at the bottom. So the reality is that this is actually starting all the way down here. At the moment, I don't really care about drawing or representing the whole wall. So we're just going to start from around about here. Before I do this, however, when I'm using weatherboard, I'll tend not to have weatherboard stuck directly to the outside of the stud. I want to create better insulation, both thermally, and I want to create better sealing. The sealing on these weatherboards isn't very good. So what I'll typically do is use a piece of plywood or a board of plywood or orientated strand board on the outside of my stud. So let's just do this by copying the plasterboard for now. And instead of being 13 mil, let's get rid of 6 of that. So it's going to be 7 mil plywood or 6 mil orientated strand board typically. And then I'm going to have my sarking or my vapor membrane on the outside of that plywood. Again, I need to switch between or toggle between my true line weight and my thin line weight so that I can see it. And then on the outside of that, I'm probably going to put battens because again, I want to have a space, a cavity between my membrane and my weatherboard. So what will that look like? That's going to look like this. Rotate. Instead of being 45, that'll be 35. Sorry, stretch, edit, reshape, stretch. Now, basically, that's going to sit here. But I don't want a horizontal batten, I actually need a vertical batten. So that'll be like that batten, but it's actually going to be, let's use the rotated rectangular method. Going down here. Now move this batten to the side for now. Now where does this go? This batten can extend up as far as I want. Now in this case, I'm going to have this extending all the way up because I want to clad over my rafter, or between my rafter might be a more correct way of saying that. So in order to make this work properly, I'm just going to make a white background just so that looks a little bit more consistent. And the idea here is that my weatherboard will sit like this. And then repeat. And repeat. Let's change the settings of that. I want an outline of 2 or 3 and a fill of 1. Let's do that again. Drag multiple copies, repeat, 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 and of course that would go all the way to the top. We can see that's an awkward little way to finish. So I'll need to finish that here. And then I'll probably end up having a little bit of a batten, something behind there, in order to be able to support that. Just a packer, effectively. And so now I've got my weatherboard. The weatherboard is extending up past the rafter, or between the rafters in reality, and so it looks like the rafters running through. Now this could be one of two things. This could actually be the continuation of this rafter running all the way out, or this could be a rafter end. So for instance, if I was just using a non-dressed piece of timber, because in this case I'm not having exposed rafters internally, I've still got a flat ceiling, so this might be undressed treated pine, and I might make this dressed treated pine, or I might make this dressed hardwood or something else like that. So I could change the size of this timber potentially, I could change the type of this timber potentially, which would mean that I'd be cutting the timber here and joining a rafter end to a rafter. In this case, I don't need to show that level of detail because that's not necessarily what I'm doing. But now we've got another type of detail, and we've basically finished out this series, and so we've looked at a few different options for at least a single-story house where we had a brick veneer wall. We have a Hebel clad wall. We have a weatherboard clad wall. We have a concrete slab on ground, and we have a suspended timber frame floor. The only one we're going to have a look at next is changing from 1-story to 2-story and adding in a suspended first floor timber frame floor.